Have you ever had this happen in a narcissistic relationship? You try hard to communicate with them in a way that they might hear you. You might say, "Hey, hon, I would love it if we could meet my sister and her husband while they're in town. We missed them the last few times they've come, and they wanted to take us to that new restaurant downtown. I know you have some stuff to do Saturday and you've had a busy week, but this wouldn't be until the evening." Okay? So you do the eggshell walking and the fluffing and the context setting and all of it. And then the narcissistic partner says, "Oh, come on. The thought of listening to your brother-in-law yammer on about his new business, and you barely even like your sister, and you know how hard I've been working, and I know you're going to make it about me and how I don't want to see them and I'm the bad guy. But you know what? It is selfish after the week I'm having to expect me to have dinner, blah, blah, blah. You know the deal. You can fill it in." And because fully cutting the trauma bonds and getting to radical acceptance is not easy, especially if there's lots of ties that bind you in this, you are hurt and it stings and you hate that your life is so isolated and you even think, "Damn, what am I doing in this relationship? It is not good for me." Then Friday rolls around, okay? And your narcissistic partner turns around to you and says, "Hey, babe, yeah, my week is settled down. It's good. Like the deal ended up working out. Let's do it. Let's get together with your sister. I know she means a lot to you, and I've been wanting to try that place. It'll be fun." Oof, right? Many people will just be happy about that. You might even think that this is the narcissistic person showing empathy, saying things like, "I know she means a lot to you." You might even be elated. You might even get mad at yourself for second guessing your partner or think you're being dramatic about even fantasizing about a life without being in this relationship and think, "See, narcissism, schmarcissism, my partner sees what matters to me." Well, the more this happens, the less happy it will make you. But for a long time, it becomes the rhythm of the relationship. The narcissistic people kind of come out with disappointment or just straight up shock and awe, showing you who's boss. And then once they establish that hierarchy yet another time, and you once again adjust to the disappointment, they'll pull back and say, "Okay, I'm so nice. You can have your way on this." As though they are doing you a favor when you are actually saying, "Hey, some decent people want to take you out to dinner and I care about them." But this example, this particular back and forth, which can just be about everyday stuff. I've talked about this idea of the perpetrator-rescuer dynamic. You may not think that, well, those words, perpetrator, that feels so severe. But this stuff wears you down. You get accustomed to the cycles of disappointment and redemption. And it's not just disappointment. Sometimes the thing that they're saying, "We can't do this," or "I am going to do this," or "I'm canceling this," will throw you into a panic. And you start wasting resources to solve the problem and the issue that is being raised. Just to have them say that, oh, that's no longer a thing. So you pop in and out of panic all the time in one of these relationships too, which is definitely not good for your health. This is a very, very difficult way to co-parent with someone because while you as an adult may be able to ride the wave of disappointment and after enough time may realize that they will always come around, but you have to white knuckle everything in your life and keep people on ice or plans on ice until the last minute, this is hard enough for an adult. But for a child who is always having to wonder until the last minute if things will work out, it is an unsafe, perilous, and uncomfortable experience. And it can be hard as the other parent to navigate your children through it and not end up trying to almost normalize it. Now, narcissistic parents will do this to their kids. And if you had a narcissistic parent, you know exactly what I mean. The parent may say no or give you the cold shoulder or the silent treatment and then come around. And a kid doesn't have the same capacities as an adult, and they also have many more vulnerabilities. So the child may feel so grateful that their parent agreed or did the thing at the last minute. And this can really firm up that trauma bond for kids. In fact, this parent that keeps them hanging and then comes through can often feel more heroic than the parent who predictably follows through and doesn't use this tactic with them, which can be heartbreaking if you're the consistently protective parent. I've shared the analogy that author Rebecca Humphreys has talked about so many times, the narcissistic relationship as someone who you meet and then the sensation of getting to know them is it's like being whisked to the top of a 100-story building, and it's exciting and the view is beautiful, and just as you're settling into their arms, they push you off. And in the terror of falling, you finally see what this really was until they catch you just as you're about to hit the ground. Your seducer becomes your perpetrator, becomes your rescuer. And that means you're attached to a very dangerous, confusing, slippery creature. And you find yourself not only forever vigilant, but also self-blaming. Now, the dynamic this video about is different. It is about you voicing a need or a want or an idea, having it shut down, being shamed about it. You may be feeling guilty, being made to feel guilty or angry, or even thinking, this relationship is not good, or this person is not cool, this isn't safe. And then that person does an about face and says, actually, I will do this for you. So they get to portray themselves as a kind, accommodating person. And for most of us, right, we just want the thing we wanted to work out. And we're also invested in retaining the attachment and all that cognitive dissonance stuff and, sort of not feeling that tense state all the time. Well, most folks don't point out that pattern of like, well, why were you so terrible to me when I brought it up in the first place? We don't bring that up. We're just glad it worked out. Now, narcissistic relationships are not about communication or sharing or growing. They are about tactics and survival. So, every decision by you has to be calculated. And this happens after radical acceptance, where you are actually informed by what this personality is. And before you get it, you may just be learning to hold back more and more and blaming yourself. Narcissistic relationships are about waiting for the good moments, right? So when they come, because the narcissistic person sort of imperiously agrees to what you want and then makes it about them being such a nice, accommodating person, you're probably not going to question the dynamic or how mean they were when they originally said no. You just grabbed the win to maybe just get something that you needed. Narcissistic relationships work because we push down the abuses and hold on to the normal feelings moments. And we try to just pretend that those normal feelings moments are most of the moments. Now, this can be even worse when it is not about getting something, but about not losing something. So here's an example of that. The narcissistic person tells you that no, you guys, we won't be taking the vacation you had planned for months, or maybe they'll say to you like, no, the kids can't do the after school program. I don't want to spend that kind of money. Or, yeah, you know what? We're going to end up moving. Yeah, we're going to move out of this town. No, I know you made all these relationships here, but nah, this other place will work out better. Or the narcissistic boss says that you will not be getting the extra support that was going to be needed to finish up a project. So you're being told that something you were expecting or that you already had will be taken away from you without much explanation. You aren't asking for anything. It's something you had and boom. Now, most people, when this happens to us, will have a reaction. Protest, sadness, anger, and that will be shut down. The usual BS of being told you're being selfish, don't you understand? You should understand why this is. And again, you may question this relationship as a result. You may even wonder if you're the one who's selfish, that whole cascade. But then after you have sat in the grief and the loss, they turn around and say, you know what? It's okay. We'll take the trip. Or I figured out how to move around the money to make the after school program work. Or, you know what, fine, we don't have to move. Or, hey everyone, I took the time this weekend to figure out how you can get that support to finish the project. Am I the guy or am I the guy? Once they tell you the lost thing isn't actually lost, the narcissistic person will expect validation and thanks and being told, oh, you're so great, thank you so much. Well, the tension in you is whether this is your hero or that this whole tension didn't need to happen in the first place. You may have already told children, the children that were going to be affected, for example, that things aren't happening and already had to wipe away their tears and manage their disappointment, or those of your colleagues. You may have girded yourself for the disappointment. And so when the good news comes, the relief that comes over you will look and feel like approval and praise, showing thanks and gratitude, rather than seeing this as the toxic pattern it is. This roller coaster of disappointment and then feeling as though the narcissistic person is making everything all right and is your hero, over time takes a tremendous toll on you. This isn't about a one-time disappointment that turns around, folks. Do not generalize this from one event. This isn't a game. This is an ongoing repeated pattern that chronically positions the narcissistic person who actually was manipulating the game to show up, to end up as the hero and savior. But you have to look at both sides of the story. The abusive or invalidating or manipulative piece. You may be glad the outcome ended up okay, but the ride was unnecessary and the wear and tear on you is real. And if you can't or don't want to leave the relationship, at least you can see it realistically. Lift the self-blame and recognize it as not being a healthy pattern, creating plan Bs, not communicating the losses to others too early, and not celebrating the wins because they aren't. They are artificial drama created by the narcissistic person to keep holding their position of power and keep posturing as a hero and show you who's boss. Allows them to stay as the savior and the dominator. You can't call them out on their game, but you can see it for what it is. And hold back on any of those big shows of gratitude. At a minimum, it'll help you feel more whole inside. This cycle that I'm talking about may not be the big traumatizing cycles of violence we often see, and that often show up in a similar way in relationships. But these small sort of thefts that accumulate over time, these smaller cuts, can do just as much harm over time, with the added burden that it is often very difficult for people in these situations to get support. Because the people looking at you will say, well, you ended up getting what you wanted, so what are you complaining about? But having to live in that back and forth universe of living in a life where disappointment is always being dangled, it is a very difficult way to live. Thanks again.